Hey guys, tonight we begin not with a scandal, a spy, or a sermon, but with a tuna casserole that could ruin your social standing. In the 1950 seconds, Housewives didn't just bake pies. They navigated a minefield of rules, where forgetting a thank you note was basically emotional arson. One wrong shade of lipstick, or using margarine instead of butter, could land you in passive-aggressive exile. So yes, before yoga pants and iced coffee, survival was chiffon, pearls, and knowing when to smile. Or else. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up before the sun, because apparently your reputation has insomnia. The alarm hasn't even gone off yet because you don't need one. Your body has been trained by fear, caffeine, and a decade of reading ladies' home journal articles that subtly suggest that any woman who sleeps past 6 is basically a communist. The room is cold, your nightgown is floral, and somewhere in the kitchen, a husband-shaped creature is about to rise and expect coffee, bacon, and mild applause just for existing. You move quietly. There is an art to it. The slippers go on first, even though they're the kind that make your ankles itch. You tied the belt on your robe tight last night so it wouldn't slide open accidentally. Not because of modesty, because if your mother-in-law ever saw you with a wrinkled sash, she'd launch a cold war. The bathroom light is too bright. You squint like a vampire facing judgment. The mirror greets you with something between concern and betrayal. Your hair looks like a failed science experiment, and your face hasn't yet remembered where it left your cheekbones. But this is part of it. You're not allowed to be tired. You are allowed to look refreshed. There's a difference, and it's called pancake foundation. You wash your face with icy water and hope it erases the evidence of your dreams, one of which involved burning down the house with a still frozen roast. You dab cold cream on your cheeks, curl your lashes with a device that looks like a medieval trap, and apply lipstick so early it might as well be a prayer. He's not even up yet, but you are. The eggs haven't hit the pan, but you've already made sure the hem of your robe doesn't fall below a certain point because apparently even exhaustion needs good posture. Your house slippers whisper across the linoleum like a secret. You light the burner. It flares. To life like an ancient god demanding sacrifice. The bacon goes on first. It's loud. It splatters. You flinch because you just washed this robe, and bacon grease is basically the devil in liquid form. The kitchen is awake now, even if the rest of the house pretends not to be. The toaster clicks on like a polite threat. You remember to warm his coffee cup, not because it makes any real difference, but because the book you read said a man can taste the difference between a cold mug and a woman who no longer cares. You butter toast with surgical precision. You scramble the eggs with a level of commitment that would make the army proud. You set the table, napkin, fork, knife, spoon, juice glass, coffee cup, sugar bowl, creamer, and one silent question. What are we even doing? The children are still asleep, blessedly. Though the baby might be up soon, judging by the whimper you hear over the monitor. You haven't spoken yet today. Not a word, but you've already clocked more labor than a minor factory worker. Your stomach growls. You ignore it. Breakfast is served when everyone else is seated. Not before. You hear the door creak upstairs. His footsteps, a clearing of the throat. The daily pageant begins. You smooth your robe, check your reflection in the toaster, and fix your smile like it's the final piece of armor. He walks in, scratching his jaw, saying nothing. You greet him sweetly, even though the smell of his aftershave hasn't yet committed to being pleasant. He grunts. This means, good morning. You pour his coffee like you're not thinking about pouring it somewhere else. He sits. You serve. He doesn't thank you. He never does. But then again, you don't do this for thanks. You do it because the world you live in tells you this is love. This is devotion. This is femininity at its finest, and you should feel honored to be its vessel. You watch him eat like he's solving a math problem. You know not to talk yet. The paper comes first. The coffee must stay hot, and your emotions must stay quietly folded like the napkin beside his plate. Outside, the sun finally rises. It spills across the kitchen floor like a revelation you're not allowed to acknowledge. The house smells like bacon, toast, and performance. The 1,950 seconds have no interest in your inner world. They care about whether the butter dish is clean and if your slip is showing beneath your dress. You are the curtain that hides the stagecraft. The illusion must hold. The neighbors might be watching. The PTA surely is, even God, if the pastor's wife is to be believed, prefers his women early rising and neatly groomed. You sip your own coffee at last. Lukewarm, quiet, alone. It tastes like applause you'll never hear. There's a reason you wake up in the dark. It's not just to make breakfast or find the one sock the baby managed to catapult across the room sometime after midnight. It's to hide from your own husband, from the world, from the mirror that reminds you you're human when everything else expects porcelain. The rules are clear. A proper lady does not let her man see the scaffolding, not the rollers, not the cold cream, and certainly not the raw, undiluted face that whispers mortal in a world demanding perfection. So you shuffle to the bathroom like a spy, timing every creak of the floorboards. The goal is to make it from bedroom to vanity like a burglar in your own home. Because if he sees you before you've done your lashes, that's not just a bad morning, it's a threat to the entire marriage. The mirror lights up under the buzz of fluorescent shame. You're not hideous. You're just real. And real isn't allowed here. Real has under-eye circles and laugh lines. Real gets tired. Real raises children and unclogs drains and remembers which night the trash goes out. But the magazines don't care about real. They care about radiant, effortless, fresh as a daisy. Which is ironic because you currently resemble a daisy that lost a bar fight. You begin the transformation, not because you want to, because you must. There's a difference, and it lives in your makeup drawer. First, the cold splash of water, like a slap from a disapproving aunt. Then the toner, which stings just enough to remind you of your sins. Foundation follows, thick, beige, smelling faintly of the drugstore and despair. It dries like plaster and promises to hold your secrets at least until lunch. You powder your nose with the precision of someone defusing a bomb, and maybe you are. Mascara next, black and clumpy, like tiny lies stacked on your lashes. Then blush, applied not with joy but with the understanding that pale equals sick, and sick equals unlovable. You smile into the mirror, just to test it, and immediately hate the way it looks forced. You add more lipstick. Red, because that's what the experts say keeps a man's attention. Never mind that yours barely notices if your head's on fire unless dinner's late. By the time you're done, you don't recognize the woman in the mirror. But that's the point, isn't it? You're not supposed to. You're supposed to become someone presentable, someone graceful, someone who looks like she woke up like this, even though you'd need a legal team and an exorcist to pull that off. You hear him stir, the creak of the bed, the cough that sounds like judgment. You rush to finish, blotting your lipstick and adjusting the curls that still haven't cooled. He cannot see the process. The process is shameful. He must believe the illusion, or what's the point of the marriage at all? You step into the hallway before he does. That's part of the choreography. You're just finishing up, breezy and nonchalant, even though you've been awake since 5, wrestling with the idea of eyeliner symmetry and your place in the universe. He mumbles a greeting, eyes not quite open, and shuffles toward the bathroom without a glance. He never notices your transformation. That's how you know you've done it right. Back in the kitchen, the clock ticks louder than necessary. You've managed to erase all evidence of sleep, of fatigue, of the quiet voice that whispered, "This is exhausting," while you were applying mascara. Your children will wake soon, and they'll think this is normal too. That women come with painted smiles and pressed housecoats and soft eyes, never raised voices, and maybe someday your daughter will sneak into a bathroom before dawn, avoiding the gaze of a man she loves, wondering why she feels less than before the lipstick. But for now, you sip coffee and smile when he reappears. "You look lovely," he says, and you pretend that feels like a compliment instead of a performance review. You thank him. He sits. You serve. The morning continues. The performance unbroken. The mask holds, and no one sees the woman underneath. The bacon is crisp, the eggs are runny, and the toast is buttered all the way to the corners, because anything less would suggest a moral failing. You move like someone auditioning for grace under pressure, balancing 2 plates, 3 cups, and the invisible expectation that you will not spill anything, not food, not feelings, not the creeping suspicion that none of this actually matters. Breakfast isn't a meal. It's a ceremony. Your kitchen is the altar, and your husband, still blinking through the fog of his own mediocrity, is the high priest. You serve him first, always. That's not just etiquette. That's sacred law according to Better Homes and Gardens and 3 generations of matriarchs who could shell peas and judge you in the same breath. You place the plate in front of him like you're handling uranium, fork to the left, knife to the right, napkin folded with military precision. You smile like someone has a camera on you, which is only slightly less stressful than the reality a husband with newspaper opinions and the emotional range of a potato. He doesn't look up. That's good. If he notices you, he might ask questions. And questions before coffee are basically acts of war. You slide the sugar bowl closer to his elbow and step back like a sommelier who knows her audience prefers instant coffee but demands ritual anyway. The children trickle in, half-dressed, sticky from sleep, speaking in half-sentences and demands. You serve them too, with equal parts affection and mild dread. One wants toast, but not that toast. The other refuses to eat anything that looks like it once had a face. You pour juice with the flourish of someone who knows the stains on the tablecloth will outlive your patience. You've done this so many times, your body moves on muscle memory. It's not about efficiency. It's about performance. You are warm but not too familiar. Cheerful but not loud. Loving but not clingy. You are a waitress in your own house, minus the tips, plus the pressure of societal collapse if you burn the pancakes. You ask if everything tastes all right even though no one answers. You offer jam. You refill the coffee. You keep the silence soft, like music that plays just loud enough to keep people from remembering they don't want to be here. Your husband flips a page of the newspaper and clears his throat. This is not an invitation to speak. This is the 1,950 seconds version of communication. Paper rustling, spoon clinking, and the occasional grunt to show appreciation. You smile again, because the articles say smiling at breakfast makes families stronger, marriages longer, and eggs fluffier. You do not feel fluffy. You feel like a balloon someone keeps adding air to, just to see when it bursts. The doorbell rings. Your stomach drops. Company. At this hour, you race to the mirror like a criminal returning to the scene. Lipstick intact, robe smooth, hair passable. You open the door with a voice you didn't know you could summon before 9. It's the neighbor Ethel, the surveillance drone in a sweater set. She just popped by with a lemon loaf and a soul full of judgment. You invite her in, pretending you haven't mentally screamed even once this morning. She looks around like she's conducting a health inspection. You offer coffee, which she declines, which is code for, I wouldn't drink anything from a woman who didn't chill her butter knives first. She smiles thinly. You return it. This is diplomacy, polite war. You sit just far enough apart that neither of you can stab the other with a butter spreader. She comments on your children's haircuts. You pretend it's a compliment. She comments on your curtains. You pretend you didn't just cry into them 3 nights ago. She asks what your husband thinks of the new casserole recipe. He hasn't said anything. You lie and say he loved it. Eventually, she leaves, and you stand by the door for a second too long, trying to remember when your house became a stage and you the exhausted understudy. You go back to the kitchen. The eggs are cold. The kids are gone. Your husband is folding the newspaper like it personally offended him. You sit. You take a bite of your toast. It's dry. But you smile anyway, because breakfast is over, and round 2 starts with the dishes. You don't live in a house. You run a very polite, underfunded, and emotionally unstable hotel, and your husband is the permanent VIP guest who never checks out. Every day begins with the unspoken understanding that his presence is an event, and you are the event planner, the maitre d', the room service, and the housekeeping staff, all rolled into one woman who hasn't sat down since the Eisenhower administration. He descends the stairs like royalty slowly, predictably, and with no real sense of urgency. You hear him coming before you see him, the creak of the step he refuses to fix, the click of the bathroom door as he leaves a trail of shaving cream and indifference behind. You've already straightened the pillows on the couch and fluffed the air, like it might whisper compliments back. You've set the table with his preferred cup, the world's greatest dad mug that none of the children picked out, and which he uses strictly because it's the right size, not because it holds meaning. He walks into the kitchen and gives a grunt that might be hello. You answer with a smile, bright enough to power a small county fair. The paper is already waiting for him, ironed flat and folded just so, because he claims wrinkles make him miss headlines. You resisted the urge to test whether crumpled newsprint really makes him less opinionated. You're not reckless. Not before lunch. He sits. Not dramatically, just with the settled expectation that the world will now orbit him. Your job is to make sure the eggs aren't too runny, the toast isn't too dark, and the atmosphere stays in the temperature range of casual admiration. You pour his coffee without asking. Asking would suggest uncertainty. And uncertainty implies that something is out of place in the universe. Nothing can be out of place. Not your hair, not the sugar bowl, not the subtle arrangement of a napkin folded like a dove of marital submission. You don't eat until he does. You don't speak unless he initiates. Conversation is a service, not a right. If he wants silence, you provide it with grace. If he wants to discuss headlines, you nod in the right places and offer small, agreeable noises that sound like you've read the paper too, even though you've only seen it from the corner of your eye while cleaning crayon off the bathroom mirror. If he makes a joke, you laugh. Not too hard, just enough to validate his wit without suggesting that your amusement could exist independently. He finishes his breakfast. You ask if he'd like more. He doesn't answer, which usually means no. You clear his plate anyway. His coffee cup stays. Always keep the cup until he leaves. That's one of the rules. It signals hospitality. It says, you can linger. The world waits for you, and linger he does. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20. Once, he stayed so long the baby fell asleep in the high chair, and you considered building a life in the pantry just to escape. But you smile and refill the cup. You watch him skim headlines with the same reverence ancient monks gave to illuminated manuscripts. You tell yourself, it's nice that he's home so much. You tell yourself this even when you find his socks draped over the back of your good armchair and a mysterious smear of butter on the telephone. He leaves eventually, briefcase in hand, a kiss on the cheek if he's feeling generous or guilty. You smile again, because that's the closing act of this morning's performance. The door shuts behind him, and the house exhales. You collect the dishes, wipe the counters, and consider, for the briefest moment, what it might feel like to be a guest in your own home. Not the host, not the server, not the woman checking to see if the roast defrosted properly. Just someone who exists in a space without having to manage every breath of it. But that's a luxury for someone else, not you. You've got beds to make and a guest returning for dinner at 6. The bed is a holy sight. You approach it like it contains relics instead of mismatched socks and existential dread. The sun is barely up, but already the room hums with silent judgment. You slept in it too, technically, though your body barely left an impression. You don't flop, you perch. One corner of the blanket is folded back just enough to suggest vulnerability, but not laziness. Anything more than that and the sheets look lived in, which is not the same thing as loved. You start with the sheets, white, crisp, possibly weaponized. You stretch them until they could double as canvas sails. Hospital corners are non-negotiable. The woman who taught you this didn't smile much, but she made a bed so tight you could bounce coins and occasionally emotions off of it. You tuck one side in, smooth it with the edge of your palm, then pull the top sheet up with the solemnity of a priest preparing for Mass. The pillows come next. They are never just pillows. They are symbols. A good pillow says, "My house is orderly." A bad pillow says, "I've stopped trying and now wear socks with holes in them." You fluff them, then beat them slightly, not from anger, but from ancestral pressure. They must stand up like they have purpose. You stack them with military precision. The sleeping pillows in back, the decorative ones in front, and the ridiculous little satin one that serves no purpose other than proving you read a magazine once. The blanket is the final layer, the ceremonial robe draped over your quiet domestic altar. You fold it back exactly 8 inches, because 7 is stingy and 9 is chaos. You smooth every edge, pat each wrinkle, and step back to check it from multiple angles like you're expecting a Vatican emissary to arrive at any moment with a clipboard and holy water. The bed must not just look untouched, it must look like the idea of touch offends it. This is not comfort. This is presentation, a daily act of devotion, not to rest, but to image. Because if someone walks into your bedroom and sees a rumpled quilt, what else have you let slide? Your moral fiber? Your marriage? The roast you forgot to season? In this house, unmade beds are the gateway sin. From there, it's only a short tumble to canned soup for dinner and children who say, "ain't." So you make the bed like your reputation depends on it. Because in a way, it does. You hear the sounds of life bubbling downstairs, small footsteps, cereal boxes shifting, the radio giving the weather with unnecessary cheer. But you stay focused. You smooth the corner again. That one fold is trying to rebel. You press it flat like you're suppressing a scandal. You step back, tilt your head, adjust one pillow by half an inch. There. Now it looks less like someone slept here and more like Martha Washington personally supervised the linen placement. You don't lie in a bed like this. You display it. You protect it from children, pets, and the breeze. You recreate it each day knowing it will be undone in hours, not because it makes sense, but because order is the only thing that keeps you from unraveling with it. When the bed is finally done, you allow yourself a breath. Not pride. Pride is dangerous, but a kind of temporary peace. Like you've secured at least 1 square foot of your world. The rest of the house may fall apart by dinner. But this rectangle, this pristine island of tightly woven cotton and self-control, will hold, for now, until tonight. When you peel back the layers carefully, lie down with your hands folded like you're posing for your own funeral, and prepare to do it all again in the morning. You stare at the vacuum cleaner like it's a judgmental relative, waiting for you to prove you're not slipping. Not slipping morally, of course, domestically, which is worse. The carpet has already been cleaned once this week, but there's a chance a neighbor might pop in and casually drop something just to see if it comes up dusty. This is not paranoia. This is the suburbs. They smile when they wave, but they're scanning your baseboards. The heels come out first, not because they make sense. Nothing about vacuuming in a narrow toe box makes sense, but sense isn't part of the dress code here. Presentation is. You slide them on like armor, open toe, modest heel, the color of powdered blush and denial. They match your skirt, which matches your apron, which matches a lifestyle no one actually lives, but everyone is expected to pretend they do. You used to think the heels were about vanity. Then you realized they're about vigilance. Slippers say, "I've given up." Heels say, "I'm still trying." Even if your arches are screaming and your soul is packed in cotton somewhere deep beneath the ball of your foot. The magazine said you should wear heels while cleaning to maintain your posture and self-respect, as if your dignity resides somewhere between your ankle and the vacuum bag. The cord stretches across the floor like a tripwire. You plug it in with practiced grace, already calculating how many passes you'll need to make for the carpet to look company ready, which is a euphemism for no one can accuse you of letting yourself go. The moment the vacuum roars to life, it becomes clear this isn't about cleaning. It's about control. You push it forward, then back, leaving perfectly aligned lines like the lawn, outside, manicured, rigid, quietly oppressive. There's something ceremonial about the motion, a kind of penitence. Every pass is a small erasure of evidence, crumbs, lint, the juice box stain from yesterday's meltdown. You don't just vacuum to remove dirt. You vacuum to erase proof that life is messy. Your heels click softly against the floor between rooms. You catch your reflection in the hall mirror and pause. There you are, polished, purposeful, absurd. You're vacuuming in heels and lipstick like you're hosting a fundraiser for household sanitation. Somewhere inside, the part of you that once wore jeans and had opinions whispers something sharp and honest, but you vacuum over that too. There's no time for rebellion when the living room rug still has a high traffic zone that looks slightly too lived in. You move furniture just enough to suggest effort, but not so much that it looks frantic. Frantic is unbecoming. Frantic is for women who don't have it together, and you are holding it together with one hand on the Hoover and the other on a fantasy where this all means something. A clean house, a well-dressed woman, a husband who notices, children who say thank you. The vacuum hums, the carpet obeys, your heels ache. The children peek in, already aware that any noise louder than a whisper will earn them a look. Not anger, not yelling, just that disappointed half-smile that says, "We do not live in chaos." You trained them young, not out of cruelty, but necessity. Clean floors are easier than clean hearts. Order is more achievable than happiness. You finish the last corner and step back. The room gleams. Not literally, because it's carpet, but spiritually. It looks untouched, unlived, perfect. You click off the vacuum and the silence that follows feels suspicious, like the house is waiting to see if you'll slip up and sit down in those heels. You won't. Not yet. There's still the hallway, the dining room, the upstairs landing, all spaces where dust might gather, and with it, judgment. So you keep going, vacuum in one hand, grace in the other. You walk tall, even if it hurts, because slippers might be soft, but they send the wrong message. Heels say you're still in the game, even if you're not sure what the game is, or when it ends. The yawn comes without warning. You catch it halfway and try to reshape it into a polite sigh, the kind that says, "My day has been full," rather than, "I am slowly unraveling from the inside out." But it's too late. He looks at you over his coffee with one eyebrow barely lifted, and you know what's coming. The question. Not kind, not curious, just an observation wrapped in judgment. "Rough night?" You answer too quickly. You smile. You say, "Oh no, just a little tired." Like fatigue is a silly hobby you dabble in, nothing serious. You don't tell him that you were up 3 times last night, once for the baby, once because your daughter had a dream about a haunted can of peas, and once because you couldn't stop thinking about the bills, the laundry, the burnt roast from Tuesday, and whether or not the gardenias in the front yard are dying or just disappointed in you. You say sorry. You say it with a laugh. You say it like you're sorry for making him look at you without your usual sparkle, sorry for momentarily being a person instead of a set piece in his daily routine. You apologize for being tired the way some women apologize for sneezing too loud, a reflex. conditioned, safe. He nods and turns the page of his newspaper. Crisis averted. The thing is, you are tired, but you're not supposed to be. Tired means overwhelmed. Overwhelmed means ungrateful. And no woman wants to be ungrateful for the privilege of a home, a family, a vacuum cleaner that sometimes smells like burning hair. You've read the articles. You've seen the television shows. June Cleaver never blinked in slow motion or leaned against the fridge just to stay upright. Her lipstick never smudged. Her smile never cracked. So you learn to apologize before anyone has time to notice the circles under your eyes. You powder over them and call it brightening. You slump only when you're facing the pantry, and even then only for 10 seconds at a time, like a soldier stealing forbidden sleep. You drink your coffee standing up, because sitting might lead to stopping, and stopping is dangerous. You apologize when you forget something where the car keys went, which day the meatloaf is defrosting for. Whether your son already wore those socks yesterday, or if he just lives in socks that look like yesterday, you say sorry when you can't remember why you came into the room, and you say it again when you have to ask him to repeat himself, even though you were clearly elbow deep in dishwater at the time and not, in fact, receiving divine revelation through your forehead. You say sorry because tired sounds too close to fragile, and fragile isn't cute. Fragile is a problem. You learn to disguise it, to stretch your eyes wide in photos so you look alert, to nod a little faster in conversation, to make jokes about how you just need more coffee, like your bones aren't made of sleep deprivation and suppressed opinions. The PTA meeting, the bake sale, the laundry schedule written in pencil on the wall calendar, it's all still spinning. And if you slow down, the machine makes a horrible grinding sound, so you keep moving. Your friend, well, the woman who used to be your friend before she moved to Arizona and took up casual tennis, once said she stopped apologizing for being tired and just started sleeping more. You laughed. And then you scrubbed the baseboards in your hallway at 9 p.m. because a guest might stop by next week and you didn't want them to sense exhaustion in the corners of the room. Later, after the kids are in bed and the house is dark and still, you lie on your perfectly made mattress and stare at the ceiling. You think about how you didn't sit down today until your back gave a small warning twinge, and even then, only because you needed to shell green beans while reviewing spelling lists. You think about the apology you gave for being tired this morning, and you wonder if, tomorrow, you'll mean it more or less. Either way, you'll still say it. You always do. And in the morning, you'll smile like you've never needed rest a day in your life. You smooth your daughter's dress for the 3rd time even though she hasn't moved. The bow in her hair is too tight and she won't say it, but you know because she keeps touching the back of her head like it's itching. You adjust it anyway. The dress must stay clean, wrinkle-free, presentable. You smile at her like it's a normal thing to do on a Thursday morning, dressing a child like she's about to walk a red carpet no one asked for. Your son won't sit still. He keeps pulling at the collar of his button-down like it's strangling him, which it probably is. You remind him gently, but firmly, that looking nice is important. He groans, because he's 7 and doesn't understand yet that looking nice is sometimes more important than feeling okay. You pat his hair into something resembling order, then check his shoes for scuffs. You notice one. You pretend you don't. You step back and look at them like exhibits. They are clean, neat, silent. You know they'll ruin it the moment someone offers juice or sneezes directly into their own hands. But for now, they look perfect, or close enough. You smile, because the neighbor is pulling into her driveway, and the show is about to begin. You open the front door just wide enough for your voice to carry and say something chipper, cheerful, nothing too desperate. Your kids follow you outside like small, confused ducklings. Your daughter frowns in the sun. Your son tries to climb something inappropriate. You stop him with one look, the one you've practiced in mirrors, the one your mother used, the one that says, "Not now," not in front of them. Because it's never just a trip to the store or a walk around the block. It's choreography. It's theater. And your children are not just children. They are evidence, proof. They are the lace on the hem of a well-pressed life. How they behave reflects on you, not just as a mother, but as a woman. If your child throws a fit in public, you don't just lose peace, you lose status. You lose the illusion. So you train them, not just in manners, but in presence. Speak clearly. Smile when spoken to. Don't speak unless spoken to. Walk with purpose, but not too fast. Don't touch things. Don't slouch. Don't be a spectacle unless it's the charming kind that makes old women say, "What well-behaved little angels." You're not raising children. You're curating a display. And deep down, you know it isn't fair. Not to them, not to you. But the neighborhood is a microscope, and your family is the slide. There are other mothers who keep peanut butter in crystal jars and never raise their voices. There are whispers that float over fences and sink into laundry lines. One bad tantrum, and your name becomes a cautionary tale in someone else's kitchen. At church, they sit beside you like trained pets, nodding when prompted, passing hymnals without dropping them. You feel the eyes on you, the gentle glances from pew to pew. You adjust your daughter's collar. You straighten your son's belt. You fold your hands in your lap and hope your face doesn't betray how tired you are from holding everyone in place. Afterwards, someone compliments their manners and you beam. It's the kind of praise that tastes sweet at first, then dissolves into something sharp. You say thank you. You don't say that you bribed your son with a cookie to keep quiet during the sermon, or that your daughter was so nervous she whispered the Lord's Prayer backwards. Back home, you let them run a little. Shoes off, hair wild. They laugh too loud and spill juice, and for a few minutes they are just children again. You sit on the porch and watch the performance unravel. You don't stop them, not yet. Let them have the moment before you call them back in and wipe their faces and remind them how to smile on cue. The costumes will go back on. The lines will be rehearsed. Tomorrow's stage is already waiting. It's not just an appliance. It's a statement, a vault, a silent but brutally honest inventory of who you are as a woman, a wife, and a mother. The refrigerator hums in the corner of your kitchen like a smug little inspector, and you already know it's judging you before you even pull the handle. Not for what's inside, but for what's missing. The illusion of perfection you were supposed to be able to chill at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. You open it slowly, like a game show contestant unsure what's behind the door. The butter dish is nearly empty, and the milk has a smell you can't quite name, but it definitely isn't confidence. There's a single leftover pork chop sitting in the glass container you swore you'd throw out last Tuesday, but you keep letting it haunt the shelf like some pork-based reminder that you're behind on life. The shelves were clean 2 days ago, or at least you think they were. You had a burst of energy after dinner and scrubbed the door trays until they stopped sticking. You told yourself you'd reorganize it fully the next morning, sort the produce drawer, toss the mystery mustard, wipe the smear that looks suspiciously like jam, but might also be regret. Instead, you shut the door and let it become a sealed container of domestic guilt, and now you're expecting company. Ethel from next door might ask for a glass of water, and you know she won't just stand at the counter. She'll follow you. She always does. The kind of woman who floats behind you like she's just being friendly, but you can feel her eyes scanning labels, checking expiration dates, noting whether your eggs are brown and cage-free, or scandalously generic. This is not paranoia. This is sport. You once saw her just glance at your half-used jar of pickle relish, and you felt your entire social standing drop like a souffle during a thunderstorm. So, now, before she arrives, you wage war with the fridge. You toss the wilted lettuce that was supposed to become a charming spring salad. You hide the off-brand ketchup behind the expensive maple syrup you only use for guests. You rearrange the yogurts so it looks like you shop with intention instead of panic. The top shelf is where you stage the good stuff. Glass containers with matching lids, clean labels, nothing chipped or clouded. The middle shelf is curated for visibility, no suspicious leftovers, nothing slouching in plastic wrap like it's given up on its dreams. The bottom shelf? Well, you accept minor losses. There's only so much a woman can do before the frozen peas in the back start whispering about mental collapse. You wipe the edges of the shelves with a damp cloth, then dry them with a dish rag that isn't technically clean but looks clean enough. You even reface the orange juice, like you're stocking a grocery aisle label forward, cap tight, plausible freshness. You pause and look at it all. It's ridiculous, but it's also kind of beautiful. The food has been groomed for inspection. A tiny parade of evidence that you are doing just fine, thank you. No one will see the drawer you didn't get to, or the jar of pickled onions that smell like a dare. If you're lucky, no one will open the freezer. The doorbell rings. Your stomach knots. You smooth your apron without realizing it and walk to the door with the kind of calm that only comes after 30 minutes of frantic refrigeration triage. Ethel enters, holding something wrapped in foil and smiling the way a cat smiles at a goldfish bowl. She doesn't ask for water. She asks for ice. You nod graciously and lead her to the kitchen, praying she won't open the freezer too fast and let the bag of frozen meatballs tumble out like a domestic avalanche. She watches as you open the fridge. You feel her eyes, her gentle nods, her approval or the absence of it settling in like fog. You pour her drink. She says nothing about the interior of the refrigerator, but she doesn't have to. You won today. The table is set with surgical precision. Silverware aligned like troops at inspection, each glass glinting with the desperate gleam of someone who's polished it twice out of anxiety and once out of boredom. The napkins are folded into triangles because you tried fans last time, and Ethel raised one eyebrow that stayed up for the entire tuna course. So triangles it is, respectable, unthreatening. Just enough effort to say, I try, but I don't overreach. You've been up since 6. Not because the food takes that long, but because the politics do. Every woman who will walk through your front door today isn't just carrying a casserole dish, she's bringing a full dossier. Observations, suspicions, recipes. She'll compliment your curtains and then go home and tell her sister you've switched to blends instead of full cotton. And somehow, that will mean something. Something about you. You're still not sure what. The doorbell rings, and you plaster the kind of smile onto your face that feels a little like dental work. You open the door with a warmth that might just barely hold if no one says anything too pointed. They all enter in a perfume cloud of expectation, lipstick, and the low buzz of competitive homemaking. You usher them into the dining room like a flight attendant, guiding passengers into turbulence. Small talk starts immediately, shallow and fast. Weather, bridge night, the butcher's new delivery boy. Someone mentions a neighbor's unfortunate drapery color, and the whole table vibrates with subtle judgment. You nod along, refilling water glasses and performing hostess duties like you trained for this under CIA supervision. Lunch is molded. Not figuratively, literally molded. You've made the Jell-O salad with the floating pineapple rings and the suspended carrot shavings because it says, I know the rules. I respect tradition. I have boundaries. You wanted to try the recipe with mini marshmallows and shredded coconut, but feared it might be perceived as rebellious. You're not ready to be the woman who deviates from the gelatin norms. Not yet. Ethel takes the first bite and hums non-committally. No praise, but no complaints either. The tightrope holds. You sit last, carefully adjusting your skirt so it doesn't wrinkle. You smile, engage, contribute to conversation without steering it. Steering implies control, and control makes people nervous. The woman to your left starts in on her latest sewing project, her voice full of casual triumph. She made matching outfits for her daughters, hand-stitched, no pattern. She says this like she's describing how she boiled water, but the meaning is clear. She has initiative. She has domestic superiority. You nod and admire her ambition. You do not mention that you once sewed a sleeve shut and pretended it was a design choice, That information is not useful here. Someone else brings up her son's reading level, already at 5th grade comprehension, even though he's only in 3rd. The table leans in slightly, as if that detail contains a threat. You sip your water and nod again. You are not here to win. You are here to survive. The gelatin jiggles slightly with each fork movement, a silent reminder that even dessert is delicate. The conversation turns to school fundraisers, then to grocery prices, then inevitably to husbands. The tone changes, polite, careful, shaded with humor, but also the kind of quiet exhaustion that dares not speak its full name. One woman jokes that hers forgot their anniversary and brought home a bag of onions. Another says hers thinks vacuuming counts as foreplay. You all laugh too hard, because it's true, because it's safe, because it's not the worst thing someone could say. You notice no one mentions love. Dessert is served lime gelatin with whipped cream and a maraschino cherry on top. You watched a tutorial for the perfect swirl. It holds. They all compliment it, politely, a little too politely. You wonder if Ethel will mention it later in her phone call to Doris. Probably. Definitely. As they gather their purses and compliment the tea towels, you thank them with the grace of someone accepting a performance award. The door closes and the air shifts. You sit down in the now empty dining room and stare at the nearly untouched Jell-O mold. It wobbles slightly in the sunlight, glossy and useless. You don't eat it. You've never actually liked lime. The iron hisses like it's annoyed with you, which is fair, because you've been holding it by the neck for the better part of an hour and it knows this blouse didn't need ironing. You know it too, but that doesn't stop you. It never does. Wrinkle-free isn't the goal. Wrinkle-proof is, just in case. Just in case the light hits it wrong. Just in case someone hugs you and feels a crease. Just in case someone in the grocery store line looks a little too long at your hemline and silently calculates how much effort you're putting into being presentable. You iron the collars first. Always the collars. They frame your face, your neckline, your composure. A good collar says you're alert, structured, not the kind of woman who's coming undone over a sink full of spoons or a child who won't eat unless the toast is diagonally cut. A good collar makes up for things. You press the seams with the tip of the iron, slow and deliberate, like you're sealing something important. You smooth the fabric with your hand before every pass, and when you find a stubborn crease because there's always one, you hit it with a burst of steam and mutter under your breath like it's a personal betrayal. You're not just ironing, you're erasing, folding yesterday's stress back into clean lines. You iron pillowcases, not because anyone inspects them, but because someone might. You iron dish towels. You iron the table runner, even though it spends most of its life hidden under serving platters and regrets you can't scrape off with a sponge. You iron socks. You tell no one about the socks. It started as a joke, one of those wouldn't it be ridiculous moments in your head, but then you did it, and now they stack nicer, lay flatter, match better. You iron the cuffs and feel a strange sense of control wash over you. Like if the socks behave, maybe everything else will fall in line too. The iron glides over cotton, polyester, linen. You learn their quirks, their needs. The cotton blouse you wear when you need to look pulled together but still soft. The rayon skirt that wrinkles just by thinking too hard. The apron that never wrinkles but still gets ironed. Because there's a difference between needing something and deserving it. You iron things that hang perfectly on their own. Tablecloths that haven't seen a guest in 3 weeks. Napkins no one uses because everyone grabs paper towels. But they're ready. They're pristine. Just in case. Your husband once asked why you iron the sheets. He said it with a smile, like it was charming. You smiled back. You didn't tell him it's because lying in crumpled sheets makes it harder to pretend you're someone else for a few hours. Someone rested, someone adored, someone who gets to fall asleep without worrying about what you forgot to defrost. You keep going. The iron cools slightly, and you adjust the dial without looking, like a pianist shifting keys. The room smells faintly of starch and quiet desperation, a scent no one bottles but every house like yours seems to carry. The stack grows, folded, crisp, compliant. A quiet little army of textiles, proving you still care, still try, still believe that effort is its own kind of worth, even if no one notices, even if they notice only when it's missing. By the time you finish, the sun has shifted across the kitchen floor, and your back has started to whisper threats. You unplug the iron, set it down gently, and stare at your work. Everything in its place. Everything flat. Everything right. For now. You clear your throat quietly before speaking, the way someone might before entering a museum. Your voice, even now, hovers delicately in the space between audible and ornamental. Sweet, polished, and entirely unthreatening. It is not the voice of a woman who disagrees. It is not the voice of a woman who needs anything. It is the voice of a teacup clinking gently against its saucer, soft enough to say, "I am pleasant," but not so loud as to say, "I am here." Raising it would be unseemly. Raising it would be something they might talk about after the church social, when your name comes up between deviled eggs and gossip. Raising it would mean letting something slip through an opinion, a boundary, a no, and you were taught from early on that the sound of your no should always feel like a maybe. So you don't raise it, you inflect, you lilt, you soften hard edges with sweeteners like just, maybe, and if, that's all right. You can deliver a full correction without ever sounding like you're correcting anything. You make suggestions like someone asking permission to exist, even when you're angry, especially when you're angry. The trick is to coat your fury in something digestible. Smile, tilt your head, lower your voice when you want to scream. When your child backtalks, you crouch to eye level and say something measured. When your husband forgets again, you laugh lightly and say, "Oh, you," even as something hot coils in your chest. When a woman at bridge club implies that your potato salad was a bit heavy on the vinegar, you respond with a titter and a compliment about her blouse. You have mastered the art of delivering all emotions with the cadence of a songbird who has never once known rage. You chirp, you coo, you do not caw, and yet the silence that follows you speaks louder than anything you're allowed to say. You once tried raising your voice. Just once, years ago. Newly married, newly exhausted, newly unsure where the line was between being a person and being someone's wife. He came home late without calling, and you were worried, then hurt, then furious. You told him so. Not loudly, not cruelly, just clearly. Your voice was your own that night. You didn't disguise it. He blinked at you like you'd spoken in tongues, and then he didn't speak at all, not for hours. The next morning, he kissed your forehead and asked if you were feeling better. You weren't sick, but you said yes. You learned. Now, when someone talks over you, you pause politely, as if you'd meant to be interrupted. When you speak in a group, you watch for eyes to glaze and adjust your volume accordingly. You save your firmest tone for toddlers and telemarketers, and even then, it's soft, courteous, wrapped in the idea that pleasantness is protection. You can recite a recipe, break up a sibling squabble, and apologize for your own exhaustion without ever dipping below gracious. Your voice never cracks. Cracks imply pressure. Pressure implies dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction implies you're difficult. And difficult women don't get asked back to the luncheon. You teach your daughter the same without meaning to. You notice the way she says sorry before handing you something. The way she laughs when she's confused, like confusion is impolite. You want to unteach it, but you also want her to be liked, to be safe, to be good. And being good, here, now, still sounds a lot like being small. You end your days hoarse sometimes, not from yelling, but from holding everything tight and light and airy. You lay in bed and replay the moments you stayed calm, stayed sweet, stayed digestible. You're not proud exactly, but you're not punished either. And that's something. Tomorrow, you'll do it again. You'll answer with a voice as polished as silver and just as cold if left untouched too long. A voice that sings what it's told, even when it has its own song aching to be heard. The oven timer dings like a small, distant accusation. You turn it off with a practiced calm, even as your pulse skips in your wrist. The roast has been in for exactly the recommended time, 12 minutes per pound, plus a little extra for confidence. You open the door, and the smell hits you first. Savory, herbed, with just a whisper of panic. You tilt your head and squint at the top of the roast like you're trying to read a warning label. It looks fine, browned, structured, upright. But the real truth is in the cut. You set the platter gently on the counter and reach for the carving knife you've polished more times than used. The first slice offers a little resistance, the kind that's not quite crunchy but definitely not ideal. You press harder. The knife makes a sound you don't like, fibrous, dry, a bit tired. You pause, then slice again. This piece tears slightly at the edge. It does not fall into place like a roast from the magazines, the ones with cheerful captions like tender and timeless. You chew the inside of your cheek. You are not just serving dinner tonight. You are submitting evidence. A dry roast is not a culinary error. It is a character flaw, a sign of poor time management, weak instincts, and questionable priorities. It says, she let something important slip through her fingers. And if you can't keep a cut of meat moist, well, what else have you lost control of? You arrange the slices like they're behaving. Spoon a little of the pan drippings on top, not gravy. Gravy would admit the meat needed rescuing. This is enhancement, support, a light gloss of redemption. Your husband walks in just as you're placing the platter on the table. He kisses your cheek, then lifts the lid. You watch his eyes. He doesn't say anything. He never does. But his pause is long enough to register. A little inhale through the nose, a tilt of the head, a look that says, The children sit, squirming in their chairs, feet not quite reaching the floor. Your daughter eyes the roast like it might be another attempt at that liver fiasco. Your son is already sneaking glances toward the bread basket. You serve the meat yourself, offering the best pieces first. The illusion holds. For now, you watch as they chew, slowly. Your husband takes a sip of water between bites, which he never does when the meat is perfect. Your daughter reaches for extra butter. Your son, ever loyal, says, "It's good." But his voice goes up at the end, like he's asking a question. You smile. You nod. You tell them thank you. Inside, you catalog every chew, every delay, every adjustment. You know what this means, not just for tonight, but for your standing. If the roast is dry, the house must not be in order. If the house is not in order, perhaps you've let yourself go. If you've let yourself go, you've failed to hold the line. The line between admirable and average, between cherished and merely present. At church, women trade recipes like secrets. The perfect roast sits at the top of that pyramid, right above chiffon pie and ambrosia salad. A roast is serious. It's what you make for guests, for promotions, for forgiveness. If yours doesn't make someone close their eyes on the first bite, you might as well be serving warm disappointment with a parsley garnish. After dinner, the plates are cleared with minimal fanfare. Your husband compliments the potatoes. The children thank you for the rolls. The roast is not mentioned again. You wrap the leftovers in foil, silently debating if they're worth saving. Tomorrow it will be drier, less defensible. You'll still eat it, of course. Waste is a sin, but the real damage is already done. Later, you flip through your recipe cards, eyes landing on the roast again. You write a note in the margin, reduce by 5 minutes, cover for final 20, a minor adjustment, a hopeful one, because next time you won't just be roasting meat, you'll be redeeming yourself. You sift flour like it's a sacrament, not an ingredient. The powder floats down in a fine mist over the bowl, catching the light just enough to make you feel like maybe this time, maybe this cake will be the one that gets remembered. You've baked it before. Everyone has. It's simple, familiar. A yellow cake with chocolate frosting, the kind that came off the back of a box once and never left the rotation. But today it's not just dessert, it's reassurance. It's a peace offering for an offense no one mentioned, a love letter in the shape of sugar. You glance at the clock. There's still time before your husband gets home, just enough to get it in the oven and wipe down the counters. Maybe change into something that says effortless, even if everything feels like effort lately. The kids have already sniffed around the kitchen twice, asking if they could lick the beaters. You let them, of course. It buys their silence and a few sticky smiles. But this cake isn't really for them. This is the cake you bake when you don't know what else to do. When he's quiet over dinner and doesn't notice your new haircut. When your mother calls just to ask if you've gained weight. When the mail brings another bridal shower invite from a girl who once failed home economics but now sends out monogrammed thank you notes. You don't slam things. You don't cry in the bathroom. You bake. You measure vanilla with precision, a drop more than needed, like maybe that extra whisper of sweetness will say what you can't. You beat the batter until your arm aches, and the kitchen smells like trying, like hope, disguised as butter and eggs, like love, if love were a domestic performance scored by the slow hum of an electric mixer. When the cake goes into the oven, you sit, not to rest, just to wait. You scan the room, searching for the next thing to fix. Magazines fanned too wide, the lamp slightly off-center, a single streak across the coffee table glass. You clean it with your sleeve. The cake rises behind you. Your husband comes home just as the frosting sets. He notices the smell and makes a sound, something halfway between pleased and surprised. You serve it after dinner, like a secret you'd been saving. He says it's good. He doesn't look up when he says it. He doesn't ask what made you bake. You nod and smile and pretend that was enough. The children eat more than they need. You tell them they can have another piece tomorrow, and they cheer. You feel a strange warmth that's not quite pride, but close. It's something like being seen, even if only for a bite. After they've gone to bed and the dishes are done, you stand in the kitchen staring at the last 2 slices. You should save them. You will save them, but not before running your finger along the edge of the frosting. Just a taste. Just to check if it's still as sweet as it was when you hoped it might mean something. It is, but sweetness only goes so far. You cover the cake carefully, like preserving proof that you're still trying. You turn off the light, and the kitchen falls quiet again. The silence doesn't bother you like it used to. It's the sound of everything still standing. The mixer, the oven, you. Tomorrow, maybe cookies. Something soft in the center. Something warm. Something that says I'm worth staying for, even if no one's hungry. You sharpen the pen like it's a weapon. Not a dramatic one, not a sword, but something quieter, more delicate. A needle, maybe. Something small and sharp enough to stitch a wound shut without anyone realizing you were ever bleeding in the first place. The stationery is pale blue with a subtle embossed border, the kind that whispers class instead of shouting it. You keep it in the drawer, beside the linen napkins and the emergency candle you pretend not to need. You start with the easy part. Dear Mrs. Pennington. You've never called her by her first name, not once in 7 years. You've been in her living room, eaten her ambrosia salad, seen the dent in her sofa cushion that proves she sits in the exact same spot every afternoon. But still, Mrs. Pennington, respect must always outrun familiarity. The next words are harder. You search for ways to describe a fruit basket without sounding like you're describing a condolence gift. Thank you for your generous gift feels too stiff. We loved the basket sounds like a lie because your children picked around the pears and your husband muttered something about more raisins. Seriously? You settle on. The assortment was lovely because loveliness is vague and vagueness is polite. The thing about thank you notes is that they're not really about gratitude. They're about fluency. They're about proving that you know the dialect of good manners, the rhythm of appreciation. Each sentence is a small performance of humility. You learned long ago that gratitude should sound like admiration, and admiration should sound a little like apology, especially when you're the one receiving anything, especially when you're the one who's not supposed to expect it. You sign your name in looping cursive, just legible enough to say you took your time. You blot the ink with a square of tissue you keep just for this, because smudging would mean rushing, and rushing means you had something more important to do. You never have anything more important than appearing thankful. Next card. This one for the casserole dish from Margaret. You already returned it, scrubbed until the bottom shone like you'd never touched it. But returning it clean isn't enough. You have to put it in writing. Thank you so much for the delicious casserole, even though the top layer tasted like she forgot which spice was which and just gave up halfway through. Still, it was such a thoughtful gesture during a busy week. The trick is to say, thank you, in a way that doesn't make her feel scrutinized, even though she absolutely scrutinized you when she dropped it off. You write faster now, falling into rhythm. Fold, seal, stamp. Each one, a tiny surrender, a record that you understand the rules and are playing along. You wish someone would write you one, just once. A note that said, thank you for hosting when you were clearly tired. Thank you for making everything look easy when it absolutely isn't. Thank you for being the kind of woman who sends these notes without fail. But women like you don't receive those kinds of thanks. You just keep producing them, like little proofs of grace under pressure. Your wrist aches by the fourth envelope. You shake it out and look at the small pile of completed cards. They seem absurdly light, considering how much weight they're carrying. You place them in your outgoing mail slot and straighten the stack twice for no reason except that neatness feels like control. You don't say the words out loud, but you hear them in your head anyway. Thank you for not noticing how hard this is. Thank you for letting me disappear into the shape of a perfect response. Thank you for giving me something to write, even if it wasn't exactly what I needed. The pen goes back in the drawer. The lid snaps shut with a soft click. Tomorrow, someone else might do something mildly generous, and you'll write again. Not because you want to, because you must. You fold the napkin into your lap, as if the action requires your full attention, like origami under pressure, and not just a cover while your ears tune sharply across the table. There's a lull in the conversation, the kind that hums right before something real is said. You don't ask questions, never pry, never instigate, but your hands go still. You sip your tea. You tilt your head at just the right angle to suggest harmless curiosity, not nosiness, just interest, just manners. Across from you, someone lowers her voice, and that's your signal. It always starts with, well, I heard, and you never ask from where. That would make it obvious. The trick is to be available without being implicated, present without becoming part of the transcript. You smile gently, nod occasionally, never offering a single word of judgment, but cataloging everything, every raised eyebrow, every pause too long, every name dropped like a small stone in a still pond. You would never repeat it. Not directly. Not without at least 2 disclaimers and a furrowed brow that says, now, I don't like to traffic in rumors, but you're not saying anything now. You're just listening, and that's fine. That's expected. After all, it would be rude to interrupt. Ethel says Marjorie's daughter might be pregnant. You make a sound like concern and not interest. You don't ask how she knows, but you note the detail about the sudden trip to the doctor and the fact she hasn't been seen at choir in 3 weeks. That might mean something. It might not. You file it away like a handkerchief in a side drawer, just in case it's useful later. Someone brings up a new neighbor whose drapes are suspiciously drawn at all hours. You look sympathetic, not amused. But in your head, you're adjusting the map, adding a pin to the mental neighborhood chart you keep without meaning to. You are not malicious. You're careful. You understand the difference between spreading gossip and safeguarding it. You've never been the first one to say a thing out loud, but you've repeated a few things under your breath to your reflection, just to hear how they sound in a different voice. You were taught early that good women don't gossip. They listen and remember. They listen and draw conclusions in the quiet hours, scrubbing sinks or folding shirts, thoughts unfolding in the same smooth rhythm as their hands. Because information, especially the whispered kind, is a currency. You don't spend it often, but you keep it tucked away in your pocket, just in case you need to trade for favor or protection or silence. You've had moments, too, where someone else's slip of the tongue turned into your quiet shield. When Ethel questioned your store-bought pie crust last Easter, it was remarkably easy to bring up innocently, with a faint sigh that some people are lucky enough to have help with the housework. You never said her name. You never had to. You don't enjoy it. Exactly. But there's a rhythm to it, a strange comfort in the ritual. The way women lean in together, like co-conspirators, over cups of weak coffee and plates of suspiciously perfect lemon bars. You bond over stories that don't belong to you, tied together by shared disbelief and carefully measured concern. You laugh where appropriate, you frown where expected, and you never forget the details. The world is built out of them. Reputation, after all, is a fragile thing. It only takes one woman with good posture and a quiet memory to shift the weight of a room. You refill your tea and glance at the clock. The afternoon is slipping by, and dinner won't make itself. Someone's saying something about a neighbor's husband and an awkward moment in the grocery store. You don't react, but your spoon slows slightly in its circle, just enough to catch the words and tuck them away. You never gossip, but you always remember who does. You apply perfume like it's a form of diplomacy. 2 dabs behind the ears, 1 at the base of the throat, and a cautious pass over your wrists that you blot instead of rub, because rubbing bruises the scent, and bruised scent is vulgar. You learned that from a women's magazine wedged between cake recipes and warnings about sagging necklines. The kind of advice that burrows under your skin and stays there, whispering instructions louder than your own voice ever could. The bottle itself sits like royalty on your vanity, heavy frosted glass with a gold cap and a name that sounds vaguely French, even though the label says New Jersey. It smells like lavender folded into powdered sugar and something softer beneath that you can't name, only feel. When you wear it, you become more porcelain than flesh. Less woman, more concept. You smell like a promise someone might want to keep, but it has to be the right scent. Something airy, demure, forgettable in the best possible way, because anything stronger might signal intention. God forbid you should smell like a decision instead of an afterthought. Strong perfume is for secretaries and jazz clubs and women who chew gum in church. It stains. It lingers too long. It tells on you. Your scent should be discoverable only in close proximity, and even then, it should apologize for taking up space. You learned the difference young. At a wedding, your aunt hugged you and left a trail of rose oil and something sharp behind her, like a cloud that had thoughts of its own. Your mother smiled tightly and whispered. She always did enjoy a little too much attention. You didn't know what that meant, but you went home and scrubbed your wrists in the sink until the smell was gone. Now you choose carefully. Vanilla is too sweet. Musk is too suggestive. Anything labeled exotic is code for trouble. You aim for floral but not flirty, clean but not cold. You want to smell like someone who sends thank you notes promptly and never drinks from a bottle. Someone who wears slips even when no one will know. On Sunday mornings, in a room full of other women wearing nearly identical heels, your perfume becomes your quiet signature, a name stitched into the hem of your identity. One woman leans in too close, and you catch a whiff of gardenia loud enough to count as a statement. Another passes smelling faintly of baby powder and resignation. You breathe and hope you've landed somewhere in between elegant, modest, just scented enough to suggest you took care, but not so much as to imply you're seeking notice. Your husband doesn't mention your perfume unless you forget it. Then he frowns slightly, like something's missing but he can't name it. You once tried wearing something bolder, something with spice in it. He asked if you were trying a new shampoo. You never wore it again. You keep one bottle hidden in the back of the drawer, a perfume you bought on a rare day alone. It smells like orange blossom and bad decisions. You wore it once while vacuuming and felt like someone else entirely. Not better, just unmonitored. You don't wear it now, but you don't throw it away either. It reminds you there's a choice in this, even if it's one you don't often take. The ritual continues: spray, blot, check, repeat. A mist of civility, a scent trail of propriety. You step into the world wearing your chosen armor, invisible but effective. When you pass someone and they smile without knowing why, you count that as a small success. You've done it right. You've said the right thing without speaking at all. The wrong perfume says, "Notice me." The right one says, "I belong here." And that's the whole point, isn't it? You staple gingham to your dignity like it might hold a neat little bow over the spot where the self you used to know used to live. The curtains in the kitchen are gingham. So is the apron you tie with mechanical precision every morning, even if you're only making toast and resentment. The tablecloth, the napkins, even the ridiculous pot holders shaped like cherries, all of it matches, like a costume you didn't get to choose but wear convincingly enough to keep the neighbors from asking questions. You once thought gingham was cute, cheerful even. It reminded you of picnic blankets and sunlit simplicity. Now it feels more like camouflage, a way to blend your mess into something palatable. You can't cry in a room that looks like a magazine spread. You can't scream while surrounded by red and white order. The pattern insists on composure. It practically demands silence. So you keep adding more of it. You hang it in the laundry room because folding under a cheerful valance feels less like surrender. You sew it onto seat cushions because it's harder to storm out of a kitchen when your chair is cushioned in charm. You iron it flat and smooth, as if neatness could bleach out what you're trying not to feel. When people visit, they compliment your decorating. They say it's so homey, like that's a good thing. Like that word isn't just a prettier way to say contained. You smile, always, and tell them it was nothing. Just a few touches. Just some fabric and effort. Just your entire identity stitched into checked cotton and pressed within an inch of its life. There are moments, usually quiet ones, when you catch your reflection in the oven door, the apron, the hair pinned just so, the lipstick reapplied for no one in particular. You look like the woman everyone thinks you're supposed to be, the one who thrives on tidiness and casserole recipes and coupons clipped with surgical precision. You look like a postcard, and it almost works, until you open a drawer to find the scissors and see the stack of unsent letters. Letters you wrote late at night on plain white paper, no gingham in sight. Words you meant, but never mailed. Truths you wrote in a handwriting that started out steady and ended up frantic. You keep them anyway. Folded, hidden, untouched. A secret beneath the surface, like dust under a doily. You tell yourself the gingham helps, that it softens the sharp corners of a life that cuts you more than you'd admit, that it's not about pretending, it's about creating comfort, about giving your children something gentle to grow up with, about holding a standard, even when it feels like a performance you forgot the script for. Still, some days you want to tear it all down. You want to rip the fabric from the windows and throw the cushions out the back door. You want to see what the kitchen looks like in stark light, without the illusion of sweetness. You want to sit at a bare table and be ugly for once. Loud, angry, real. But then the doorbell rings, and you smooth your apron, check your lipstick in the hallway mirror, and step into the scene you've curated so carefully. Someone is here to borrow a cup of sugar, or deliver a church bulletin, or drop off a pie that comes with a side of veiled questions. You hand them what they need, offer a compliment, and laugh softly at just the right volume. They leave thinking you've got it all together. You close the door, turn back to the kitchen, and pick up a dish towel trimmed in red gingham. You wipe the same spot on the counter twice, just to be sure it still shines. Your face becomes a tool, sharpened by use, softened by necessity. You learn early that certain truths are too heavy for the room, so you store them behind your eyes and teach your mouth to lie beautifully. A smile becomes your default punctuation, an ellipsis that trails off before anyone asks too much. You smile when the meatloaf burns. You smile when your name is mispronounced. You smile when someone at the garden club says something that makes your insides go cold. Politeness is not just a tone, it's a choreography. You nod, purse your lips in a way that says, "How interesting," without committing to opinion, and tilt your head just enough to suggest you care. You practice in mirrors, not out of vanity, but survival. You try expressions on like sweaters, finding the one that will get you through the next social engagement without raising suspicion. Discomfort is not allowed to surface. Displeasure is rebranded as thoughtfulness. Exhaustion is concealed with powder and posture. You discover the subtle art of the sympathetic wince, the performative chuckle, the smile that stretches just wide enough to be read as friendly but stops short of being too available. You perfect the raised eyebrow that looks curious instead of critical. You master the downward glance that says, "I'll pretend I didn't hear that," without making the other woman feel embarrassed. Your face becomes your finest embroidery, stitched with layers of understanding you never voice. You don't interrupt. You don't grimace. You certainly don't scowl. You absorb. You mirror. You reflect back to people the version of themselves they most want to be seen. When someone brags about their husband's promotion at a dinner you hosted and forgot to thank you for, you respond with a look that says, "How lovely," instead of what you're actually thinking, which is something closer to, "Do you ever shut up, Carol?" But even that thought is quickly buried. Like a scrap of gossip you wouldn't be caught dead repeating. You don't indulge in pettiness. You curate civility. Sometimes you feel your cheeks ache from all the holding, from the smiling through sermons that drone on too long, through PTA meetings where ideas are ignored until voiced by someone louder, through moments when you're spoken over or spoken for. But pain is not an excuse. Pain is private. You reserve that for the laundry room, or the car, or the seconds before you fall asleep with a face mask that promises to lift what no serum truly can. Your husband doesn't notice the nuances. He notices when you don't smile. That's when the questions come. Are you upset? Did something happen? Is dinner late? You've learned to recalibrate fast. A small upturn of the lips, a hand brushed over his shoulder, the sound of your voice raised half an octave. That usually does the trick. With your children, you allow more softness, but even then, your expressions are curated, warm, never panicked. Even when your youngest brings you a broken lamp and says it wasn't them, you furrow your brow just enough to communicate mild concern, not frustration, because frustration is messy, and mess is contagious, and mothers are supposed to be steady as Sunday. You watch other women too, at the grocery store, at church, across dinner tables. You see how their faces flicker in microsecond betrayals before correcting themselves. You catch the brief flash of irritation before it's swallowed, the half second too long it takes to answer a question politely. You note it, not judgmentally, just with recognition. You wonder if your face tells on you the way theirs do. You hope not. You wear your mask well, not out of falseness, but practice. You are not fake. You are filtered. You are tempered. You are fluent in a dialect that only other women truly understand. A slight shift in the eyes, a too smooth smile, a breath held a little too long. It's a silent language, passed like heirlooms and whispered over coffee. You don't need to say how you feel. You've trained your face to say it for you, and then deny it with grace. You smile before you speak, before you sit, before you've even finished thinking. It's not a conscious act anymore. It's a reflex, as natural as breathing and nearly as vital. You smile when you don't mean it, when you don't want to, when you barely have the energy to form coherent words, but still, it stretches across your face like a curtain, decorative, functional, concealing, because your smile has a job to do. It smooths tension in rooms where your voice might crack. It fills in the silence after someone says something mildly insulting, but in that charming tone that makes it hard to call out. It opens doors, disarms strangers, softens sharp comments so they land like compliments if you pretend hard enough. A well-timed smile can get you through a conversation you don't want to have and out of one you never agreed to start. Your smile is a performance and a shield. It's how you say, "I'm not a threat in a world that's always checking to see if you might be." You smile when you bring out the roast. You smile when the neighbor asks if you've put on weight. You smile when someone calls your husband the real breadwinner, even though you haven't sat down since sunrise, and the bread you win is baked, sliced, and served before anyone thinks to thank you. Sometimes your cheeks hurt. You smile when you don't want visitors. You smile when you open the door anyway, with your dress freshly pressed and a tray of lemon squares you didn't feel like baking. You smile when people assume your life is simpler than it is, when they compliment your tidy house without knowing that you vacuumed crumbs off the bathroom floor 30 minutes ago while still wearing earrings. Your smile is currency. It's how you buy time, approval, and peace. A smile at the right moment can turn criticism into concern, suspicion into trust. It's the only power you're allowed to wield without apology. And even then, you're careful not to wield it too boldly. Too wide, and it's desperate. Too tight, and it's cold. There's a sweet spot, warm but modest, pleasant but restrained. You find it without a mirror now. You know the shape by muscle memory. But then there are the days when your smile is a hostage signal, a quiet plea tucked inside your lips, a coded message to the mirror that says, "I'm still here, underneath all this." You smile through the phone call that drains your last ounce of patience. You smile through the party where no one asks about your thoughts, only your recipes. You smile through the headache, the doubt, the disappointment that smells like scorched pie crust and sounds like someone else's opinion spoken too confidently at your own table. And no one sees it. Or maybe they do and choose not to mention it. Because polite women don't confess in words. They confess in corners, in sighs too small to echo, in smiles that flicker just before the door closes behind them. Still, you keep smiling. You do it because it works, because it keeps the questions away, because you've learned that to stop smiling is to invite speculation, and you don't have the energy to explain what doesn't fit into a dinner conversation. You smile because it's easier than asking for help you wouldn't know how to receive, because it's familiar, because it's safer, and because sometimes, even now, there are moments when the smile is real, a soft, quiet kind of real, like the warmth that lingers after someone else has finally gone to bed and the house is yours again, or the way your reflection looks just a little gentler in the dim bathroom light. You smile then, not for show, not out of habit, but because for a breath or two, you're not holding it up like a mask. You're just letting it rest. The door opens, and you're hit with a wall of pineapple punch and hairspray. Not a cocktail, just the natural scent of 15 women squeezed into one living room, clutching pamphlets and secrets, pretending they came for the storage options. You smile, of course. You always do, because no one just walks into a Tupperware party. You arrive, poised, polished, with a dip in one hand and diplomacy in the other. You bring a casserole because showing up empty-handed is practically a crime, and your dish, carefully labeled with masking tape and maternal pride, finds its way to the folding table like a silent offering to the gods of domestic achievement. It sits beside a molded Jell-O salad and a suspiciously fluffy tuna surprise. You don't ask questions. You never do at these things. The food is just set dressing for a far more delicate play. Every seat is already claimed, not by place cards, but by history. You scan the room like a field officer Linda's perched on the floral ottoman with her latest, just for fun, Avon side hustle pitch, ready to pounce. Carol's in the corner, probably judging the dip to cracker ratio. And then there's Bev, already pouring punch like she owns the place. You know better. She only thinks she does. You pick a neutral zone by the fireplace and settle in, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded like you're awaiting trial. And in a way, you are, because this isn't a gathering, it's a negotiation. Every woman here is running a quiet campaign, best kitchen, best complexion, best behaved children, and you're all playing for invisible points. The hostess starts with a speech that sounds rehearsed but earnest. Something about how Tupperware changed her life. You nod in solidarity, while secretly estimating how much this will cost you, not just in dollars, but in restraint. Because there's always that moment when someone says something so incredibly smug, you could snap a celery stick with your bare soul. The bowls are passed around like sacred relics. The burp seal is demonstrated like it's the second coming, and you make the appropriate sounds, soft gasps, impressed eyebrows, a whisper of envy when she unveils the limited edition pink set with the same reverence some reserve for baptisms. You pass them along, touching each lid like you're blessing it, and keep your face neutral. You know better than to show too much interest. Interest means commitment. Commitment means purchase. Purchase means explaining to your husband why another piece of plastic that locks in freshness was absolutely necessary. Not that he'll ask. He'll just raise an eyebrow and say something about how he remembers a time when leftovers went in foil and somehow no one died. You keep your rebuttals internal. Someone wins a door prize. A melon baller. She gasps like she's just been proposed to. You clap politely and resist the urge to ask how often she's balling melons. The jokes stay in your mouth, nestled behind your molars like unruly children that aren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. Eventually, the order forms come out. You fill yours with the same care as a tax document. Not too much, just enough to be respectable. You circle a set of stackable containers and scrawl your name neatly, like you're handing in a final exam. Across the room, another woman selects. The deluxe modular mates, with confidence you suspect, is built entirely on store-bought pie crusts and generational wealth. Before you leave, there are hugs, air kisses, compliments on brooches, hairdos, potato salads. You deliver them all without blinking. Each one a vote in next month's popularity poll. And as you walk out with your catalog tucked under your arm and a sense of vague financial guilt blooming behind your smile, you realize you've survived another one. Another polite skirmish disguised as an evening of friendly commerce. Another small war in the long campaign of womanhood, where victory is measured not in territory, but in perfectly sealed leftovers. And dignity, of course, contained safely in pastel plastic. You step out of the house with your hair pinned, your blouse crisp, and your smile set to marital bliss. Not the wide, giddy kind of joy, too obvious. No, what you aim for is contentment. The warm, smug glow of a woman who has it all figured out. A woman whose husband reads the paper without grunting, whose arguments never get louder than a murmured misunderstanding about potato salad, whose love story was pre-approved by church newsletters and neighborhood gossip alike. Your husband walks 2 steps ahead. It's not symbolic. It's just the way things have always been. You fall in line, match his pace, and nod when he tells the story wrong again. He adds flourishes that never happened and forgets details that mattered, but you laugh like it's new every time. That laugh is part of the costume. Familiar, practiced, precise. It tells the world, don't look too closely. Everything here is just as it should be. At church, you sit side by side but never touch. Touching would be too much, too personal, too real. But you hand him the hymnal without looking, and he takes it without asking. That, too, is a kind of intimacy. Quiet choreography, rehearsed, unquestioned. The sort of thing that convinces the lady behind you that you must still be madly in love. When someone asks how he's doing, you always answer for him. He's been working so hard. He's taking on so much. He's a saint with a lawnmower. You speak like a press secretary, offering only what fits the narrative. No one needs to know about the silence that blooms between dinner and bedtime, or how he sometimes falls asleep mid-sentence, or how you stopped finishing each other's thoughts because now you mostly keep them to yourselves. In public, you're the perfect pair. You never contradict him, not even when he misremembers your anniversary by 2 full weeks. You smile and say, "Time flies," and change the subject. You don't roll your eyes. You don't sigh. You definitely don't say what you're thinking, which is that the last time he remembered something about you without prompting, it was your maiden name and it was for a bank form. At bridge night, he places his hand on the small of your back when he passes, and you try not to flinch. It's not that it's unwelcome. It's that it feels like someone else's husband doing it, like a reenactment, like 2 actors revisiting their hit roles because the audience still wants the old magic. So you sell it. You tell stories that start with "we always" and end with "isn't that right, dear?" And he grunts his agreement, which everyone seems to accept as evidence of devotion. You laugh at the right places, steer the conversation away from anything heavier than casseroles, and when you see another woman glance at you with something close to envy, you let her. You let her think that your home is filled with candlelit dinners and slow dancing and little handwritten notes tucked into coat pockets, because pretending is easier than explaining, easier than saying you miss a version of him that maybe never existed, or that sometimes you fantasize about a motel room with silence and a sandwich you didn't make. No one wants that story. They want the glossy kind, the good wife, the doting husband, the legacy of love that makes Hallmark cards seem underwritten. So you master the art. You never speak over him, never drink too fast at dinner parties, never admit you're bored to the marrow. You tuck the truths under layers of politeness and lipstick. And when he calls you kid in front of the pastor, like it's still 1948 and you're still charmed by it, you don't correct him. You just smile like you always do, because this is the show. And you know your lines. You learn quickly that money is the kind of thing nice people don't mention. It's not that you aren't supposed to have any, on the contrary. You're meant to have exactly enough to make everything look effortless. But talking about it, asking about it, needing it, that's vulgar. That's for other people. That's for neighbors who hang laundry on the line too close to the street or ask if you're using that bacon grease. You, on the other hand, smile tightly when someone compliments your new dress and say, "Oh, just a little something I found on sale," even though it wasn't on sale, and you'll be cutting coupons for 3 weeks to offset it. Appearances are everything, and appearances are not cheap. The curtains must be fresh, the rugs must be vacuumed, the roast must be from a decent cut, and the cake must be frosted like you didn't whisper curse words into the mixing bowl. There is no budget for these things, because to imply a budget is to imply limits, and limits suggest your husband isn't providing the way he should. And a husband's pride is delicate as bone china. So you play your part. You nod along when other wives complain about rising prices, but you never add your own woes. You don't admit that you've watered down the milk once or twice or stretched a meal into leftovers even your dog rejected. You simply say, "It's all about clever planning," and let them imagine your pantry organizes itself. At luncheons, the other women talk about new linens and window treatments, and you nod even if your own curtains are clinging to the rod with one last hook. You don't let it show. You don't mention that your youngest needs new shoes or that the electric bill came with a note this time. You just sip your tea and adjust your pearls like you've never once reused gift wrap. Even in your own home, the theater continues. You clip recipes from magazines that assume your spice rack includes saffron and your fridge never dips below half full. When your husband asks about finances, you downplay the tension like a magician hiding a dove in her sleeve. You say things like, "It's all under control," and "We're right on track," even if the track in question leads straight off a fiscal cliff. You iron his shirts with a calm expression even when you're wondering whether you can stretch the laundry soap another week. You nod politely when he mentions inviting the boss over for dinner, and you say, "Lovely," Instead of, "Do you think the boss enjoys tuna casserole disguised as chicken a la king?" you cut your own corners, not visibly, but artfully. You reuse ribbons. You learn how to make wax paper look elegant. You know which store brand tastes closest to the real thing and how to disguise a day-old cake with just the right amount of powdered sugar. Your children never know. They think everyone eats chipped beef on toast because it's fancy. And you carry it all with poise. You say no to yourself more times a day than you can count. No to new lipstick. No to that dress in the window. No to asking for help, because help would mean admitting that things aren't picture perfect. Because here, perception is prosperity. And prosperity means never letting them see you squint at a price tag or wince at a receipt. It means writing thank you notes like you weren't silently wondering if you could afford the gift you gave. It means walking through the world with the easy confidence of someone who always knows exactly what's in the checking account, even if you haven't balanced it since last spring. It means smiling through tight holidays and tight waistbands and the kind of tightrope walking that leaves your feet numb. You never say you're struggling. You say we're blessed. You say we manage. And you smile like your pantry is full, your bills are paid, and your life costs nothing but gratitude. The baseboards know your secrets. So do the blinds, the stovetop coils, and the undersides of the couch cushions. They are the true judges, the silent jurors in this glossy trial of womanhood. And you clean them not because anyone will see, but because someone might. That possibility hangs in the air like the scent of lemon-scented furniture polish a constant, invisible pressure that tells you this house must always be ready for an impromptu magazine shoot or a surprise visit from a neighbor who just wants to pop in, but somehow makes it all the way to your bathroom and forms opinions about your towel folding technique. You wake up already behind. The sun has barely breached the horizon, and you're scrubbing rings out of the sink like they insulted your lineage. You fluff the throw pillows with the same concentration used by surgeons, and when you vacuum, it's not a sweep across the rug, it's a grid, a ritual, a choreography of lines so neat you'd weep if anyone walked across them too soon. You clean as if domestic failure is contagious. Your kitchen must sparkle, and not just on the surfaces, the fridge gleams. The inside of the oven is scrubbed free of the ghosts of casseroles past. You soak burner grates in vinegar and scrub grout lines with a toothbrush older than your youngest child. Every crumb is a declaration of laziness. Every smudge is an accusation, and you can't afford to be accused. The living room is a performance piece. Magazines are fanned just enough to look accidental. Ashtrays are emptied, even if no one smokes. You plump the cushions and smooth the drapes. If a stray dog wandered in, it would be afraid to shed. You polish the coffee table until your reflection reminds you to fix your hair. Bathrooms are sacred battlegrounds. You scrub toilets with militant determination. You fold towels into geometric origami. You restage the soap dish at least 3 times before it looks like no effort at all. There is no such thing as just clean. There is only spotless, and then there's shame, and shame smells like mildew. You do not rely on Febreze. You simmer cinnamon sticks and cloves on the stove like a woodland witch warding off judgment. Every room must smell like you have nothing better to do than bake. God help you if it smells like you've been cleaning. That's admitting you're behind. You are never behind. You are simply maintaining a perfect standard at all times, even if your wrists ache and your mascara has started to rebel. The bedroom is your resume. The sheets are crisp. The pillowcases match. You've ironed the dust ruffle, which no one has ever commented on, but the day you don't, you know someone will. Your closet could survive a white glove inspection. Your dresser drawers are so orderly, the army would weep. And none of it is for show, but all of it is. Because while no one ever says they expect this of you, they notice when you fall short. They notice the fingerprints on the light switch or the stray thread on the carpet. They never mention the effort, just the exceptions. You don't get praised for the gleaming mirror. You get raised eyebrows when there's toothpaste in the sink. You've become fluent in invisible labor. There are no parades for polishing doorknobs, no medals for delinting the lampshades, but you do it anyway, because in this world, cleanliness is more than godliness. It's your report card, and you intend to graduate with honors. You keep your home so immaculate, it whispers. It doesn't scream perfection. It hums it. It smiles politely and says, "Of course, we live this way. Doesn't everyone?" Because heaven forbid anyone thinks otherwise. You feel it before you see it. That vague, itchy awareness that something is off, that the air has shifted just slightly, like the barometric pressure of judgment is climbing. You're standing in your own foyer, holding a basket of freshly folded laundry. When it dawns on you, you forgot to polish the front doorknob. You'd meant to. You wiped it quickly with the edge of your apron while rushing to reheat last night's pot roast and hush a child who decided that today was the day to explore the acoustic potential of a saucepan. But a wipe is not a polish. You know the difference, and so do they. You can already imagine her voice. Mrs. Halpern from 2 doors down, the woman whose begonias bloom with unnatural precision and whose garbage cans never once clatter, even on windy days. She won't say it outright. That's not her way. She'll make a passing remark while adjusting her gloves. Something about how fingerprints on brass can say a lot about the tone of a household. Or maybe she'll simply pause a beat too long when she reaches your porch, the glint of your neglect catching her perfectly lined eye like a personal insult. Because in this neighborhood, brass is not just a metal, it's a mirror. It reflects your work ethic, your marital stability, your moral compass. A dull doorknob is the equivalent of yelling in public. It's a lapse in civility, a suggestion that perhaps, just perhaps, you've let other things slide too. So you rehearse your expression. You can't look flustered. That confirms guilt. You can't look indifferent either. That's worse. You settle on mild surprise, the kind that says, "Oh, how strange." That must have just happened, even though it clearly did not. You open the door as if nothing's wrong, as if your entryway radiates the same soft glow as the cover of a home goods catalog, and you pray no one steps close enough to notice the telltale smudge right beneath the keyhole. But of course, someone does. Not directly. Indirectness is a neighborhood sport. There will be a comment about how Estelle down the block uses a vinegar solution that really brings out the shine, or perhaps a gentle observation about how brass can tarnish so quickly when it's exposed to, hands. You nod and laugh and make a mental note to buff that handle within the hour, then probably every other day until your knuckles give out. The thing is, no one will admit they care. They'll tell you appearances don't matter, that real life is messy, and people should be judged by the content of their character, not the luster of their fixtures. Then they'll go home and whisper over dinner about the state of your entryway and whether you've been too distracted lately. Distracted is neighborhood code. It means tired, disheveled, unwell. It means maybe your husband has started ironing his own shirts, or maybe your Jell-O mold collapsed at the last potluck and everyone politely ignored it, but still talked about it afterward in hushed, delicious tones. So you learn. You keep the polish in a basket by the door. You add it to the list, just beneath fresh flowers for the table, and make the meatloaf look intentional. You shine that knob until it gleams like your reputation depends on it. Because in a way, it does. It's not really about brass. It never was. It's about sending the signal that everything inside the house is just as orderly as what they see from the sidewalk. That your children are thriving, your husband is content, and you have everything under control. Even the things no one should be expected to notice, but they do. So you polish, you smile, and you wait for the next inspection to begin. It starts days in advance, not hours, not an afternoon of polite tidying and a quick roast in the oven. Days. You circle the date on the calendar like it's a federal inspection, and immediately begin mentally cataloging your entire home for signs of weakness. The napkins are acceptable, but only if ironed. The silverware could pass, but you polish it anyway, because what if the light hits a water spot just as Mrs. Emerson leans in to ask about your meatloaf? That's how reputations unravel. Because this dinner isn't just a meal. It's a referendum on your home, on your marriage, on your competency as a hostess, and, therefore, as a woman. The roast is your handshake, the tablecloth your character witness, and the meatloaf, well, that's your soul on a platter. With ketchup glaze, you plan with military precision. The guest list is strategic, a delicate balancing act of neighborhood politics and mutual tolerances. Too many gossips in one room, and someone's bound to explode. Too few, and the silence becomes suspicious. You stagger the seating chart to keep enemies across floral centerpieces and place the couple with the loudest opinions beside the ones least likely to speak. You set the lighting low enough to flatter, but not so low that anyone squints at their peas. And then there's the menu. You test the meatloaf the night before like a scientist preparing an antidote. Not too dry, not too wet, not too experimental, because no one trusts a woman who improvises with dinner staples. You consider adding a dash of Worcestershire, but think better of it. This isn't the time for creative risks. This is the time for predictability. Perfectly seasoned and served at exactly 6:30. By the time guests arrive, you've already changed outfits twice. The first dress was too celebratory. The second was too close to mourning. You settle on something that says approachable elegance and pray the zipper holds. You greet them at the door with a smile so wide it aches. The scent of pot roast trailing behind you like a friendly ghost, meant to reassure them of your domestic success. You navigate the evening like a flight attendant trapped at cruising altitude with 8 passengers and no autopilot. You refill drinks with surgical accuracy. You laugh just a moment after the joke, so it doesn't seem forced. You nod, along with Mr. Carson's long-winded anecdote about lawn maintenance while mentally calculating if the rolls will be warm by the time you serve. When the meatloaf hits the table, there's a hush. Not a dramatic one, but the kind of quiet that means evaluation has begun. You watch them cut, chew, swallow. A bead of sweat forms at the base of your neck. You smile through it, holding your breath like it's part of the recipe. And then someone says it, this is just like my mother used to make. Relief floods your chest, followed closely by dread, because now they expect dessert. And not just any dessert, a dessert with layers, with cream, with the kind of presentation that whispers, "Yes, I do this all the time." You serve it with a flourish, acting surprised by the compliments, as if you didn't practice the whipped topping design on a paper plate 3 times that morning. You clear plates with the grace of a diplomat, never letting on that your feet ache or that you haven't sat down since noon. By the time the door finally clicks shut behind the last goodbye, you're exhausted in a way that feels almost mythic. But you don't collapse. You start the dishes, you wipe the counters, you reset the furniture, just in case someone stops by tomorrow to return a dish and secretly inspect the aftermath. Because tonight went well, and tomorrow they'll talk. Not about the weather, not about foreign policy. They'll talk about your centerpiece, about how moist the meatloaf was, about the way your linens matched your smile, and you'll listen through the grapevine, smiling to yourself while scrubbing a pan that no one even used. It starts innocently enough. A neighbor's voice laced with that high fructose tone, so sweet it could rot enamel, offering a helpful tip you didn't ask for. Something minor, something petty, something so precisely targeted it has to be rehearsed. "Oh, I noticed your curtains are lined with muslin. That's clever, dear." Just being helpful, you know. The phrase lands gently, but it detonates hours later while you're rinsing dishes and reevaluating every window treatment in your house. Just being helpful is never about help. It's a warning shot wrapped in gingham, a passive-aggressive telegram from one woman to another that she's noticed a flaw you didn't realize you were displaying. Maybe it's a smudge on the hallway mirror or a slightly overbaked pie crust. Maybe your child wore a shirt with a small stain to school. Maybe you wore flats to the store. Flats to the store. Whatever it is, it was a breach. And she saw it. And now she's here to let you know, with a tilt of her head and a smile too wide to be real, that she's observed, cataloged, and gently corrected it. You learn to brace for it. Like flinching at thunder, you start hearing the phrase from across the street before it's even spoken. Just being helpful means someone noticed that your garden didn't bloom quite on time this year, that your casserole was a bit too spicy for conservative palates, that your husband wore a mismatched tie to Sunday service and they're wondering if maybe you're distracted lately. No one ever says you're slipping. They don't have to. They say things like, "Let me know if you ever need help keeping up. I know how busy things can get." Just being helpful. Your smile becomes part shield, part lie. You nod. You thank them. You say things like, "Oh, how thoughtful," even when your inner monologue is quietly plotting a revenge quiche. You go home and clean something, anything, just to reclaim control. You straighten the towel bar. You vacuum an already vacuumed rug. You reposition the throw pillows until they resemble a showroom, all because someone noticed and offered their help. Sometimes it's your mother-in-law offering to send you a new pie recipe after yours turned out a little rustic. Sometimes it's the PTA chair suggesting you try a different dry cleaner because your husband's shirts looked a bit tired at the last school fundraiser. And sometimes it's that woman down the street, the one whose children are always clean, quiet, and vaguely translucent, offering to lend you her housekeeper's number with the tone of someone gifting you salvation. You develop radar for it. It's in the pause before the sentence, in the way their hand lingers on your arm like an anchor wrapped in pearls. It's never loud. Loud would be merciful. Loud can be defended against. But this is surgical. It's a scalpel disguised as a compliment, meant to carve just deep enough that you bleed self-doubt onto your best apron. But you learn the language. You adapt. You master the subtle art of counter-helpfulness. "Oh, I noticed you started using instant mashed potatoes for weeknights. What a time saver." Delivered with the same syrupy concern, the same sparkle in the eye that says, "We're all pretending here, but some of us are better at it." It's a cold war of civility, and the arsenal is endless. Tone, implication, and the quiet knowledge that every woman in this neighborhood is walking the same tightrope in heels. Eventually, you understand the rule. Just being helpful is the verbal doily placed under a critique so it doesn't stain the table. It's not about being kind. It's about asserting rank without raising your voice. And as much as you loathe it, you catch yourself doing it too. Because surviving this world means knowing how to smile while sharpening your own spoon. And when you say it, you do it perfectly, with poise, with grace, with just enough of a pause to let the message marinate. Just being helpful. You catch yourself mid-sentence. Again. The thought almost makes it out, half-formed, harmless. Just a tiny opinion about how the town's new mayor seems a bit too fond of his own voice. But your brain snatches the words back just in time, chews them up, and swallows them down. You smile instead, a soft one, non-committal, as though you were merely listening, never forming an independent judgment. That's the trick, after all, to appear engaged without ever being involved, to nod with just enough interest that no one thinks you're dull, but never so much that they suspect you of feeling strongly about anything, because feelings are messy, opinions even worse. You've been trained in this, not formally, no certificate, no syllabus, just a slow, consistent conditioning that started somewhere between your first etiquette book and your fifth silent dinner, where someone's husband made a questionable joke and all the women just chuckled like their necks were attached to the same puppet string. It's not that you don't have opinions. You do. You're practically bursting with them. Your thoughts have thoughts, but you treat them the way government facilities treat nuclear waste containment. First, release. Never. You seal them off behind smiles and polite affirmations. You bury them in casserole recipes and thank you notes. You build entire internal monologues and never speak a word of them aloud, except maybe to the cat when no one else is home. There's a rhythm to this restraint. You know which topics are safe: weather, recipes, praise for other people's children. You also know the landmines: politics, religion, even books sometimes, depending on the circle. You've learned to pivot with grace, to transition from a controversial news headline to a comment about how lovely someone's porch geraniums are this season. You wield compliments like a fire extinguisher, smothering anything that starts to flame. Your husband makes a comment over dinner, something you disagree with completely. You smile and say, which could mean I see your point, or you've just said something monumentally absurd. But since it's delivered with a delicate sip of wine and no change in tone, it's untraceable. Later, in the carpool line, one of the other wives starts in on something she read in a magazine about women working outside the home and how it's nice when it's just for the extra spending money, but not when it's necessary. You nod slowly. Your mouth curls into what could almost pass for agreement, though inside, you're cataloging every unpaid hour you've poured into homemaking like it's a trust fund that never matures. You don't argue. That would be unladylike. It would make people uncomfortable. And making people uncomfortable, in your world, is worse than being wrong. So, you master the art of silence. Not true silence, but the kind that hums with subtext. The kind that says, I hear you, without, I accept this. You smile when someone interrupts you. You laugh when you're underestimated. You let people explain things to you that you already know, sometimes better than they do. And you do it all with the serene face of someone who's just happy to be included. But in private, when the dishes are done, the curlers are set, and the door is locked, you allow yourself to speak. Not out loud, necessarily. Maybe just in your journal. Maybe in the way you arrange the living room furniture, even if your husband prefers it the other way. Maybe in the quiet decision not to invite that one neighbor again, even if she never notices why. Because even silence has teeth. You've learned that withholding your opinion doesn't make you empty. It makes you strategic. It gives you the power of plausible deniability and the kind of invisibility that lets you see everyone clearly while staying just out of reach. You don't need to be heard to be aware. You don't need to shout to be dangerous. You keep your thoughts sealed, labeled, and stored in climate-controlled chambers behind your eyes. And when the moment comes, the rare one, the quiet one, you choose which valve to twist open, carefully, selectively, like a woman who knows just how much pressure the system can take before something glows. He makes the joke with his mouth half full of roast beef, which somehow only adds to the conviction with which he delivers the punchline. Something about women drivers, or maybe how women are emotional, or can't parallel park, or spend too long shopping, or mix up the gas and the brake when they're flustered. You've heard them all. They aren't new. They're ancient scrolls now passed around in polyester slacks and lazy baritone chuckles. And you nod, because that's the choreography. You nod like you're hearing the bard himself unpack the human condition in iambic pentameter. You smile, small but practiced, like you've just stumbled across a lost Shakespeare sonnet hiding at the bottom of a cocktail napkin. Your eyes flicker to the other wives. They're nodding too. No one laughs too hard. That would seem desperate. But everyone chuckles just enough, like it's a delightful, harmless relic from a simpler time, even if that simpler time often feels like it had a brick wall built where your voice was supposed to go. The men keep talking. They clink glasses. They roast their wives in third person, while their wives are seated 3 inches away. My wife spends more time at the beauty parlor than the house, one says, while yours says, she doesn't know what the car horn is for except to wave at her friends. Everyone laughs, so you do too. It's not real laughter. It's muscle memory, a reflex carved by years of understanding that to object is to cause a scene, and to cause a scene is to become that woman, the difficult one, the humorless one, the one no one wants to invite back. So, instead, you perform. You time your smile to the rhythm of the room. You clasp your hands in your lap, and you keep your spine straight, even though something inside you is slouching in disbelief. You want to say something. Sometimes, you want to lean forward and ask what century everyone thinks they're in, or whether they've ever actually watched their wives reverse park between two garbage cans with 3 screaming children in the back seat. But you don't. You can't. Because it's not just about the joke. It's about what happens after. The silence, the glances, the lingering looks that say, she took that a little too seriously, didn't she? And once you have that label, no amount of potluck desserts or matching dish towels can peel it off. Your social currency dries up. Your invitations dwindle. You become the story that gets passed around in the jokes, not just the audience for them. So you laugh. You laugh in the way women have for generations, like a translator reading a hostile phrase and choosing to soften it for diplomacy. You smooth the air around it. You sand down the edges. You diffuse. And then, later, when you're doing the dishes or folding the laundry or reapplying your lipstick for the 5th time that day, you replay it in your head and allow yourself the luxury of honesty. It wasn't funny. Not really. But it was familiar. That's what makes it harder. The joke doesn't sting because it's clever. It stings because it's old, because it's been passed from father to son like cufflinks, because you know he probably heard it first at 12, laughed because the older men laughed, and never questioned why the women only smiled and never added anything of their own. You're not angry. Not always. Not at him. Not exactly. You're tired. You're tired of translating disrespect into pleasantry, of packaging dismissal as graciousness. You're tired of pretending the joke isn't about you when it clearly is. You're tired of clapping for a play where none of the women get any lines. Still, the next time he tells one, and there will be a next time, you'll nod, like you're at the Globe Theater, like you're watching a masterpiece unfold, because some performances aren't for entertainment. They're for survival. You don't notice it all at once. It arrives quietly, like mildew behind wallpaper. At first, it's just the new salesgirl at the department store, calling you ma'am with a sweetness that stings. Then it's the neighbor's teenage daughter asking if you used to be a model or something, with a glance that suggests that used to is doing most of the heavy lifting. You still wear the red lipstick. You still know how to put together an outfit that stops traffic on purpose. Not just because you're in the crosswalk too slowly, but something's shifted. It's in the way your jokes land a beat too late, the way your stories about back when suddenly feel more like ancient parables than charming memories. The world doesn't slow down. It barely blinks. You used to be the axis of the house, the magnetic field of every room. Now you catch yourself offering things before people ask, smoothing tablecloths that don't need it, waiting for someone to ask your opinion and then offering it anyway, lightly, carefully, like you're holding it in tongs. You wonder when your voice started lowering out of habit, not courtesy. When your hands began folding themselves instead of gesturing. The young wives call you Mrs. now, even though you're only 10 years older than some of them. They ask you for casserole tips and stain removal tricks, like you're a walking Better Homes footnote. You smile, offer wisdom, and pretend you don't hear the unspoken translation. You're not competition anymore. And then, in some monstrous twist of irony, you catch yourself standing in your mother-in-law's exact posture. It happens in the hallway mirror. One hand on your hip, one eyebrow slightly raised. That look that says, I don't mean to judge, but I already have. You freeze. You remember this stance from the early days of your marriage, when you were still soft around the edges and she could slice you with a glance. You promised yourself you'd never become her. But now, here you are, slightly stiff, slightly jaded, whispering critiques in your head with the same passive-aggressive grammar. It doesn't mean you've turned into her. Not fully, but the threat is there, like gray at the temple, like orthopedic shoes lurking in the department store aisle, like the realization that your sympathy for her might be sneaking up on understanding. You start keeping mental inventory of the little things that tether you to relevance. The music you secretly like, but pretend not to. The slang you practice under your breath before using it in front of your children's friends. The magazines you hide behind the classics on your bookshelf. You rehearse cool in the privacy of the laundry room. You try not to flinch when someone says TikTok. The worst part isn't that you're getting older. It's that you're becoming less visible. Like your best work is already behind you, wrapped in a June wedding and a well-set table. No one warns you that once the apron comes off and the children grow up, the silence that replaces them might echo. You are expected to be grateful for the peace, and you are. But it's the kind of peace that feels suspiciously like exile. So you double down. You style your hair with extra care. You throw yourself into perfecting the crust on your pies and the shine on your floors. You offer advice with just enough humor to avoid sounding bitter. You keep up appearances because the alternative is being pitied. And if there's one thing worse than aging out of your own story, it's becoming a side character in someone else's, especially if that someone is the new wife across the street, who just asked you for your punch recipe while wearing your youth like it's brand new. You nod and hand it over. Not the real one, of course, that you keep for yourself. You don't plan on crying. Not at the grocery store, not in the car, and certainly not while folding towels that smell like lavender and obligation. But the tears have a schedule of their own, and they don't particularly care for protocol. So you learn eventually, quietly, with the kind of discipline usually reserved for diplomats and tightrope walkers, that tears can be folded too, tucked away in silence, pressed neatly into the edge of a handkerchief so delicate it might as well have come with a sigh stitched into the corner. It starts with the little things. A dish breaks, and it's your favorite one, the one that always made peas look less boring. You hold the shards too long before sweeping them up, like they might reassemble if you apologize sincerely enough. Or the neighbor's child says something about how mommies today don't stay home anymore, and smiles like it's progress. You nod. Of course. That's wonderful. Then you excuse yourself to the powder room, where the walls know better than to ask questions. You cry like it's a scandal if anyone notices, and the handkerchief gifted at a bridal shower by an aunt who said something cryptic about future storms becomes your companion. It doesn't ask what's wrong. It doesn't offer advice. It's simply there, like a secret pact between you and your more fragile moments. It sits in your handbag between the mints and the unused lipstick, waiting, a lace-trimmed lifeboat. You learn timing. Crying is fine as long as no one sees it happen. The kitchen is safe after everyone's gone to bed. The laundry room is excellent. Machines make white noise and don't tell tales. The back porch, late at night, when even the stars are too polite to stare. You perfect the art of pressing tears into fabric without ruining your mascara. You fold emotion like linen, with corners crisp and clean. And when someone asks how you are, you answer with a smile that feels like walking on a sprained ankle. Perfect, you say. Just busy, just tired, just fine. The truth is harder to pin down. Maybe it's that being everything to everyone, all the time, leaves you with very little for yourself. Maybe it's that love, when stretched too thin, starts to feel more like a costume than a connection. Or maybe you don't even know why you're crying. You just know it leaks out in sighs and spoon clinks and the long pause before answering a simple question. You don't fall apart. That's not allowed. You just come slightly undone in places no one bothers to check. The handkerchief is there when a casserole flops and someone jokes that you're slipping. It's there when the doctor calls and says your mother's memory is more memory-shaped than memory. It's there when your child says, "Mom, it's not a big deal." But it is to you, and you can't explain why without sounding ridiculous. So you don't. You cry like it's a recipe no one handed down, but you figured it out anyway. A pinch of ache, a tablespoon of silence, stir in a smile. You don't stop living. You don't stop showing up. You still pour coffee and answer the phone and nod at the right moments. But part of you lives inside that little square of fabric, folded in a drawer with things no one else remembers but you. A ballet ticket stub, a button from a dress that doesn't fit anymore, a list of baby names you never got to use. When you dry your eyes, you do it delicately. The tears are never loud. The pain is never theatrical. You are refined, even in sorrow, because being messy is a luxury reserved for people who have someone else to clean it up. You tuck the handkerchief away. No one saw. You smooth your hair, reapply your smile, and then you go serve dinner like nothing happened. You figure it out slowly, like a woman realizing her favorite lipstick shade has been discontinued but keeps using the stub anyway. It doesn't happen in a dramatic collapse or a sudden breakdown over burnt pot roast. It happens in small, quiet moments, like when your smile wavers a second too long, or when you stare at the pristine living room and wonder when it started feeling like a museum curated by exhaustion. You realize she doesn't exist. The perfect housewife, the one from the magazines, the one who always has lipstick on and a roast in the oven and patience in her veins. She's a ghost sewn from advertisements and neighborly gossip, a composite sketch built from judgment and jealousy, and one woman's offhand comment that her floors get waxed twice a week. You've never met her, but you've felt her eyes on you every time you chose canned green beans instead of fresh, every time your slip showed, every time your child had a tantrum in public, and you had the nerve to look human about it. But here's the thing. The illusion is mandatory. No one says it out loud. There's no pamphlet, no formal agreement, just 1,000 tiny clues that stack like china in a cabinet, fragile, valuable, and not yours to drop. You play along because opting out means standing alone in a room full of women who speak fluent politeness and passive critique. They won't shame you directly. That would be unseemly. But they'll ask how you're managing with such a small freezer. They'll tilt their heads when you admit you used instant mashed potatoes. They'll smile with their teeth and say, "How brave of you to wear that color." So you keep playing the part. You host with grace. You iron like the wrinkles are personal insults. You buy the good napkins even though no one notices but you. You pretend your marriage is always warm and never confusing. You accept compliments like medals and criticism like scripture. And when you see other women doing the same performance, you nod, because solidarity sometimes looks like synchronized denial. You aren't foolish. You know the perfect housewife is a myth built on insecurity and reinforced with Tupperware lids and floral aprons. But acknowledging that out loud, that's dangerous. That opens the door to questions. And questions lead to answers no one is ready to hear, like how lonely it is to feel like furniture in your own life. Like how often you wonder who you could have been if someone had asked you before you became her. So, instead, you polish the doorknobs, you smooth the bed sheets, you laugh a second too long at jokes that aren't funny, and you pretend, not because you're weak, but because you're fluent in survival. Because pretending keeps the peace. Because if you let the mask slip, even once, someone might assume it was never real. And then the whole fragile tower comes down. But at night, when the house is still and your hands stop moving, you allow yourself a moment of truth. Just a breath of it. You sit in the dark kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the only witness, and you admit not with words, but with a kind of exhausted honesty. You're tired of playing a role no one truly understands. You sip cold tea from a chipped cup and let your shoulders relax. You're not her. You never were. But you've played her convincingly. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Not because she's real, but because the performance has become the structure. Because pretending is easier than explaining why you stopped. Because, somewhere deep inside, you hope maybe if you act the part long enough, the world will finally admit it was all just theater and hand you a curtain call you didn't know you needed. Until then, you set your alarm, fluff the cushions, and rehearse your smile in the bathroom mirror. The perfect housewife doesn't exist, but no one needs to know that.